There is this one scientific principle that helps explain how we think and how we feel and how we move and how we perceive the world around us. And if you can wrap your mind around it, you will have unlocked one of the secrets of the universe. But before we get into it, let me ask you a question. When is the most powerful moment in your life? Is it when you are standing up on a stage receiving an award, or is it when you are sitting quietly by yourself thinking deeply about your life? If you thought about that first scenario, that's kind of the popular narrative we tell ourselves about being important. But what if I told you that that second scenario is actually more powerful? If you have the ability to think, then you have the ability to change the world. You see, there's this one thing all neurons have in common. They're all constantly communicating with each other. There are 86 billion neurons in your brain, and each one of them is sending out signals constantly. These signals allow your body to react to stimuli from the outside world and allow you to think and feel the way you do. And even when you're not consciously thinking about anything at all, like when you're sleeping, these neurons are still active and sending signals. And they wouldn't be able to do any of that if it wasn't for one very special phenomenon. It's called resting membrane potential. When I heard about this concept for the first time, I was shocked. It seemed impossible that this could be real. But once I understood it, everything just clicked into place and made sense. So let me show you how it works. Let's start with the basics. Neurons are cells that carry electrical signals. Specifically, they send out action potentials, which are basically just electrical pulses. But before a neuron can fire an action potential, it needs to be in the right state, and that state is called the resting membrane potential. It is the state of readiness that allows the neuron to receive incoming signals and decide whether or not it wants to fire its own signal in response. But here's where things get weird. The resting membrane potential is actually negative. Imagine the inside of the neuron is like a big battery that has been fully charged up with positive charge. That means the inside of the cell has more positive charge than the outside of the cell. So if we were to measure the voltage between the inside and the outside, we would get a reading of 0. But in reality, it's just the opposite. The inside of the neuron is actually more negative than the outside. So if we were to measure the voltage again, we would get a reading that looks like this, minus 70 millivolts. That might not seem like much, but it's actually really important. This little difference in voltage between the inside and the outside of the neuron is what allows the neuron to do its job. It's what allows it to receive incoming signals and then fire its own signal in response. Without this negative charge, neurons wouldn't be able to communicate with each other. So why is this negative charge so important? Well, it turns out that a lot of the stuff that's inside the neuron is positively charged. Like we said earlier, the inside of the cell has more positive charge than the outside. But what makes that possible is the fact that there are all these positively charged ions floating around inside the neuron. The most important of these ions is sodium, which has a single positive charge. That means that if we had a bunch of sodium ions floating around in a cell, the overall charge of the cell would be positive. But there's also another ion that's really important, and that's potassium. Potassium has a single positive charge, just like sodium. But unlike sodium, potassium tends to leak out of the cell. That means that if we had a bunch of potassium ions floating around inside the neuron, the overall charge of the neuron would be negative. But it's not just potassium that's leaking out of the cell. Sodium is also leaking in. And that means that at any given moment, we have a bunch of different ions flowing in and out of the cell. So what keeps the neuron from becoming positively charged if sodium is leaking in and potassium is leaking out? Well, it turns out that there are proteins embedded in the cell membrane that act like gates. These gates control the flow of ions in and out of the cell, and they do it in a really clever way. When a gate is open, ions can flow through it, but when a gate is closed, ions can't. And that means that we can use these gates to control the charge of the neuron. By opening and closing these gates at the right times, we can make sure that more sodium ions don't leak into the cell and make it positively charged. At the same time, we can also make sure that too much potassium doesn't leak out of the cell and make it negatively charged. The way it works is really elegant. Each gate has a trigger. For example, some gates open when they're exposed to a certain chemical, while others open when they reach a certain voltage. When a gate is triggered to open, ions can flow through it and the charge of the neuron changes. By controlling these gates, the neuron can keep its charge in check. That might sound complicated, but it's actually really simple. All we need to do is make sure that more sodium ions aren't leaking into the cell than potassium ions are leaking out. And we can do that by controlling these gates. At any given moment, we have a bunch of different ions flowing in and out of the cell. But by controlling these gates, we can make sure that the overall charge of the neuron stays negative. So what does this mean for us humans? Well, this negative charge is what allows neurons to communicate with each other. It's what allows us to think and feel and move. Without this negative charge, neurons wouldn't be able to send signals. And without signals, we wouldn't be able to do anything. This tiny little voltage difference between the inside and the outside of a neuron is what allows us to experience life. And the cool thing is that this happens all the time. Every time you take a step or say a word or eat a piece of food, neurons are firing action potentials back and forth, sending signals from one part of your body to another. And it all starts with this negative charge. We tend to think of electricity as something that's dangerous and scary, but it's actually what makes life possible. Electricity is all around us and inside us, and it's what allows us to interact with the world around us. We tend to think of ourselves as separate from the world around us, but we're actually a part of it. We're made of the same stuff as the universe itself, and we interact with the universe in the same way that everything else does. We're all connected, and it's this connection that allows us to experience life. So the next time you're feeling negative, just remember that it is only negative because of this tiny little voltage difference between the inside and the outside of your neurons. And it's this difference that allows you to experience the world around you. If you didn't have this negative charge, you wouldn't be able to do anything. So embrace the negative. It's what makes life possible. Now, hopefully you understand how this negative charge is what allows neurons to communicate with each other. But why is this important? Why should you care? Well, it's important because it's what allows you to do everything. It's what allows you to think and feel and move. It's what allows you to perceive the world around you. Without this negative charge, you wouldn't be able to do anything. And it's easy to forget that because it's always there. It's like the air that we breathe. We don't notice it until it's gone, but it's there all the time, allowing us to do everything. So the next time you're feeling negative, just remember that it is only negative because of this tiny little voltage difference between the inside and the outside of your neurons. And it's this difference that allows you to experience the world around you. If you didn't have this negative charge, you wouldn't be able to do anything. So embrace the negative. It's what makes life possible. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe. And if you want to learn more about the human brain, check out my video on how memory works. Thanks for watching.